Oftentimes, I see people's eyes glaze over when they hear the phrase or buzzwords data-driven inserted into the conversation. And it's a real shame because it's not terribly complicated. So I'm going to try to boil it down into a simple explanation and relate it to one or two things that you might be familiar with. The first one is the very thing that you are watching or participating in right now. It's a streaming channel. The second one, we will talk about Disney and how they relate with data-driven as far as physical modeling. Sound like fun? Maybe not. Well, we'll try it anyway. Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, hiss and foes, welcome to the Culture Casino!
Right now, you are watching this video on a phone, a tablet, a computer, or even a television set. These devices are capable of delivering AV content to you, but they are also in and of themselves a point of data. So let's say someone is watching this video on their Android phone. Well, that phone, including its model number, operating system, and all the other aspects of that phone, including the application that is watching the video, those are points of data. These data points give us information about the user. It's not a lot of information, but it's some, and it adds up. The video that's actually being watched has several points of data in and of itself. In fact, the title, the subject matter, the thumbnail, the tags, all of that information, that's all data. With a streaming service, streaming platform, or a digital service, we usually provide bits of information ourselves. And we forget about that because we've been filling out forms all our lives, signing up for various accounts. We are willingly giving away and surrendering our very private personal data. So consider that. With YouTube, you likely gave them your name, maybe an age, maybe a gender. Some people don't do that, but you also may have linked some of your payment information here. So you've just given them a whole lot more information about you. Google, YouTube, same company from Alphabet essentially, are the kings of data and data analysis. So much so that they even seek out other people's data to capitalize on it. This is one of the primary issues right now between Roku and YouTube. In a story that I talked about on the 6 Minute Daily, going back at least a week or so, Roku and YouTube are actually in a bit of a spat. Normally, these spats are about revenue, or revenue sharing, at least in Roku's case. But as Roku is an OTT platform channel provider, YouTube is just one of the many channels that you can actually access through the Roku service. Channel providers provide a small cut of monetization to Roku for the privilege of having a channel on their channel platform. YouTube has a certification process with Roku and vice versa. The subscription-based YouTube TV app is the current thing that's in dispute, although the YouTube app itself is maybe also now in dispute, but we'll see what happens there. And this is because in the future, YouTube wants more data from Roku than any other channel provider. Roku actually reserves this data that they're collecting to themselves, and they should. Roku is the most solid streaming box, at least as far as set-top boxes go, that you can find out there. Stellar reputation. They also have Roku available on hundreds of thousands of televisions. Now, Roku streaming televisions are a new thing with a little bit of more advanced technology, and they do have a lot of data. In fact, Roku has become so large now that they've announced over 54 million active users in their last quarterly report, or darn close to that. I think it was 53 and change, but I would say 54 is probably even more accurate as of today. On top of all of this, they just acquired the data division of Nielsen and all of their data services, which I reported, I think, back on March 3rd here on the channel. This will give Roku the power to not only know their customers, but they will be able to target those customers with data-driven commercial delivery. But hey, they will also have some real transparency into what people are actually watching via streaming. And they've actually had this for a little while. Even more, this type of device will grant a level of transparency that we've never had before. And that's valuable to Roku and also Nielsen, vice versa. And since they're cooperating, I think they might share data. YouTube wants this info, of course, and they want a deep reach into the actual hardware and its capabilities. Now, that's a problem for Roku, and let me tell you, it should be. Frankly, it should be a problem for every competitor with YouTube and Google and Alphabet, but hey, we're just going to stick with Roku here. It's actually being touted by Roku as a little more than monopolistic. I think that's the word they used. Maybe it's a little harsher than that. It was definitely harsher than that. The data that Roku acquires will give it a competitive advantage, and it can also be leveraged into various types of offerings. My hope is the true reporting of digital consumption will be available. Again, transparency. But it will also drive the new methodology of shows and film creation, at least in those particular industries. Because, again, you'll be able to see with very quick results what people are interested in and what they're not. You'll see where people actually turn off their viewing when something comes across on the screen that they don't agree with or they're no longer interested in seeing. And by the way, just as an aside, media has kind of lagged behind here on the data side of things. In fact, probably the biggest studio that kind of lagged behind was Warner Media. They were very resistant to the data-driven programming models until after the merger, and they got rid of the former CEO there. But that's another story for down the road if we ever get around to talking about Warner's data-driven decision-making. But again, it's nothing like Disney's and some of these other companies, so we'll move on. All of these points of data are important, of course, because they can all be broken down into the best possible customer for everything. And think about that, the best possible customer. So content delivery and, of course, advertising, which is the most important thing, can be driven to a specific person, believe it or not. That's kind of spooky. We've talked about it before. I thought it would be more fun to dive a little bit deeper into it. So let's look at how data can drive decision making, of course, in the physical world. So let's move over to Disney. Disney uses data to manage every single aspect of their theme parks, but the crowning achievement of this right now is, of course, Walt Disney World, located in Orlando, Florida. Back at the beginning of something called Next Gen Project and that rollout of said project, the plan was to make everything better for the guests. At the time, the minds that put this plan into effect were going to increase efficiency. So they would have just-in-time food and reservations for people. They would have just-in-time staffing for attractions and transportation. They would also have the ability to allow people to book attractions prior to even showing up at the theme parks well in advance. Something like this will obviously make the biggest entertainment enterprise function even more smoothly than it ever had at any point ever before. Oddly enough, the system worked out after it worked out some bugs, and it yielded exactly what it intended to, and it did it very well. During the next year or so, the system made things so much more efficient that parks got a great reputation for guest satisfaction. You could experience more. The perks of staying on site outweighed the additional cost and gave those guests additional value across the board, surely because of extra access. Now, this was at a time when their rival was building something pretty spectacular themselves, Harry Potter. But we'll set aside that competition for now and move forward with this. Of course, as with anything, when you gain a certain amount of information about how to make things more efficient, things change. The bean counters started to take control, and they were looking for ways to slowly cost cut by removing small pieces of value here and there, eroding it. The system had created opportunities to manage out quality and showmanship, or to manage it to its barest acceptable standard. This often created issues for the guests that were supposed to be reaping the benefits of said system. It also crafted and created new ways to keep guests trapped in certain patterns or in even certain parts of the park, believe it or not. This was a subtle way of getting them to spend more money. It more efficiently removed said money from their pockets. So right now, instead of being able to conquer most of Magic Kingdom in a single day, you'll be lucky to get 5 or 6 attractions completed. And this was the average, obviously, before even the global crisis that just occurred, happened. And at that time, you were paying upwards of $112 a day to ride 5 or 6 attractions. You could do most of the park, but it was still possible when you went commando, as it's often referred to. But it requires a lot of very careful planning, and also the use of something that was very important, the valuable extra magic hours, and a little bit of luck. Of course, that changed dramatically, as I said. So how did this all happen? How did it come about? Well, data. They were able to use all of these different data points that they knew about the guests. They utilized a system that they called the Magic Band system, which can track people from different points from about 30 feet away, let's say. You're wearing a RFID chip, a couple of different radio types, from what I'm to understand, and it becomes your ticket, it becomes your hotel key, it becomes a lot of things. In fact, they're starting to phase that out in favor of people using their very own cell phone. Because you have a cell phone, don't you? Man, that irritates me. Anyway, moving on. Disney now staffs attractions at levels that are below their full efficiency. And they've been doing that for quite some time. They do it to save, of course, salary, which it does, and they do it to increase wait times. They also delay opening of certain attractions to certain parts of the day, even though it is possible, as they've done in the past, to open the attractions all at the same time, like used to be done. They do it in an effort to pattern guests to and from different parts of the park, and to crowd control, which they've always been very good at, but to essentially have lines, believe it or not. Instead of removing the lines like they tell you they'd like to do, they've discovered that there's a certain amount of lines they want to have. So the increased wait times that these create, of course, make sense for them financially because it drives the guests to the food and beverage places, like the restaurants and all the little concession stands that they have in their parks, and it also drives the guests to shopping. Of course, lots and lots of merchandise is sold within their parks. A lot of it. So the head bean counter at the time, Bob Chapek, was happy to take advantage of the data-driven opportunities, obviously for the parks, and believe it or not, Bob Iger was happy to make sure that they were baked into pretty much every segment of the company after that. In fact, Disney at the end of this year will be hosting essentially a data conference. You can participate in this. Sign up for it now. It's stupid expensive. It's like $2,000, but hey, more power to you if you want to learn how to use their formulas and try to, apply them to whatever business that you participate in. Of course, their reasons are a little different, but hey, they also occasionally have decent guest speakers, although I think now it's just like a motivational speaker at this point. At least it was last year. Anyway, I'll go on and on. Let's continue. Disney now, of course, as I mentioned before, has now locked in the lowest acceptable standards that the guests will be willing to, again, accept. But believe it or not, they're looking to go lower right now. Don't believe me? Recently, they've begun sending out another survey. They do this especially to pass holders and people that have various perks within their corporation to try to see about how they feel about things being removed, including, not limited to, their party events, right? Their party events cost more money. You have to pay extra money to go in at what is now after hours, even though the parks have closed early, to create an opportunity to have these parties, right? Anyway, I'm going to get upset if I talk about that more, but I'm going to say this. These party events cost more money. You get 2 or 3 hours, 3 hours of time, maybe 4, hard to say, just depends on the party, time of year, etc., etc. And these events used to be worth a marginal price. Now the prices are exorbitant, almost as much as a ticket at some points in time. And part of what they want to do at the parties is eliminate even more value from those parties themselves. So they want to remove the very expensive and elaborate parades that they have. And the little shows. They want to eliminate or reduce the scope of the shows and the show effects that they produce and replace those things with cavalcades, smaller shows, and of course the digital projections that you can see. I don't know. It seems like you're losing value, you're charging more money. But they want to hit the lowest level that they can and yet still charge more. So just be prepared for that. And when you stack this on top of a recent agenda-driven indoctrination campaign that everybody's now made aware of, and the outright lie that the CEO, Bob Chapek, told at the annual investor meeting, Disney has clearly gone in the wrong direction for most people. And if you're an investor, man, you've got to be looking at how overvalued they are. It's ridiculous. But look, somewhere at some level, however, there is data telling them this. They know it's there because they have all the data. They, like so many other companies right now, and someday I'll do a video on that, they just don't care because, again, they're driven by something else and it's not good business. At least not now. And for now, of course, Disney will continue to use their data for their park shows and films and many other things, including their cruise lines, that give them what they think are acceptable results, but of course not the incredible results that they are capable of, which again, I have a problem with. So, if you're an annual pass holder, be on the lookout for that survey and let them know exactly what you think about all the various changes that they are wanting to implement to, again, take away more value and opportunity from you. And be on the lookout for more shows and films that are data-driven from Disney and many others. And they're going to be easy to spot. They will be the ones that you watch for a few episodes or the film that you watch halfway through and realize that it just turned into another lecture or preachy homily or whatever else you'd like to say. It just isn't entertainment anymore. Anyway, there is so much more to talk about around data farming and how it is going to be moving to the next stage for a lot of companies. Almost every company, I would imagine, at this point. And like I said, it's going to be interesting to watch. So I'll probably talk more about it in the future, just like I'm going to dive back into some other analytical measurements that are being used, like reading tea leaves for TV ratings and stuff like that. But anyway, just expect more of that. Finally, what do you think? Do you think Disney will continue to drive out value across the board, including films and television, by using data to justify it? I think so. And do you think Roku, the first part of the subject we were talking about, is in their right to hold on to their data rather than surrendering it to an anti-competitive monopolistic source? I think they're right too. Anyway, thank you so much for checking out the video today. I truly appreciate it. Be sure to support other independent creators here on this platform. We have so many wonderful creators out there, and they just don't get the support from the platform that they deserve. I have many channels that I watch, many suggestions here towards the bottom of the page. You can check all of those out. And, you can find me on any one of 17 other live streams on other people's channels every week. So I'm obviously trying to support them as well. Anyway, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, wash your hands, of course, because it's good hygiene. And until next time, bye.
Thanks for visiting today. Be sure you're subscribed and hit that for alerts.
Yay!
Of course, like and share all of the videos that you can, as it helps with the algorithm. Have a great day.